It's the Kyle Hyman Show on Redeemer Radio.
This is Kyle Hyman, and joining us today to talk about her book, Life and Love, Opening Your Heart to God's Design, is Terry Polakovic. Thanks for being here, Terry.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah. Your book takes a look at Humanae Vitae and how it compares to other church documents, other encyclicals and things. How many encyclicals do you think that you've read?
Well, for this book, actually, there are 8 encyclicals. Every single chapter is devoted. It starts back actually in 1880, and the encyclicals pertain to the church's teaching on love, marriage, contraception, divorce, all that kind of thing. So every one of those. So the way I wrote the book is that I started out with Pope Leo XIII, and he wrote an encyclical in 1880, and it is called Arcanum. And in that document, he focuses on a number of different things. One of the things is he talks about the separation of church and state, but he also focuses on the harms of divorce. It was written during the Industrial Revolution, and so people were leaving their homes. You know, the family had always been a family unit in a particular business or farm or that type of thing. With the Industrial Revolution, it demanded that people leave their home and they go into the city or whatever. And so divorce was becoming rampant at that time. So that's his main focus of the document. But again, he introduces the social issues of the time, which is the Marxism and that type of thing.
And so is there a direct correlation between this document that was written back in 1880 and things that we're dealing with today?
Yes, that's what I found so interesting as I went through these 8 different documents, is that every single one of them, first of all, it could be written for our culture today. Secondly, and it's written by different popes at different times and that type of thing. And also, what I just found interesting too is just continuation of the teaching. You know, the Pope writing it would pick up on the document before and reinforce that document, but add his own take on whatever the issue is at that time. For instance, the 3rd chapter is dedicated to Humanae Vitae. So Pope Paul VI goes back and builds on the first document, which was Arcanum, and he builds on the second document, which is Costa Connubii, by Pope Pius XI. Anyway, that's how it goes, and all the way up until Francis's document on Amoris Laetitia, and what the family. It's a very long document, but he lays out very clearly the role of the family in the world and with each other.
Why are church documents like these important? Why should Catholics be paying attention to them in the first place?
Well, they're important because they're teaching documents. I mean, you have heard, and I've heard many times, I don't know what the church teaches on that. I'm not sure, that type of thing. What I have found, I used to run an apostle. I was one of the founders of an organization called Endow, and it was educating on the nature and dignity of women. So that was the whole purpose of the organization, was education. And, what I found through that whole experience, I was there for 12 years, is that women, particularly because we're working with women, they cannot express the church's teaching. They may believe it in their hearts and they be acting it out, but if someone asks them why the church will not bless a homosexual marriage, that kind of thing, they cannot articulate it at all.
Right.
And so that's one of the reasons they should read the documents. The documents a lot of times are not easy to read, and I think that's why people stay away from them. But I think we should go back. I mean, this would just be the beginning of what I've done. I think we need to go back and dig up. What did they say? What did they say? And when did things go off course? And, like I said, one document, pertains to divorce. The next document really focuses on marriage. Then, Paul VI focuses on, contraception. Anyway, they all build on each other. And so I think as lay people, we need to do everything we can to make it accessible to other Catholics so they can get rooted in the teachings of the Church.
So what was your process of doing that? You mentioned some of these might be difficult to read. So what was your process of rooting through them and picking out some of the highlights and then deciding what goes in your book and what doesn't?
Well, I read through every single document, and then I also tried to find, and did find, many resources about that document. And then, like, were there other study guides or, that kind of thing. So that's how I did it. And then I just chose certain particular parts that I felt were very important and very interesting for today's audience, honestly. So I guess what I'm trying to say, it is going to be difficult for someone who's not that so inclined to sit down and read a church document. But if, like in my book, I unpack it, and so then it's much more easily accessible.
Right.
And so I think, people talk about some of the most beautiful documents in the church are the documents from the Second Vatican Council. Rarely are they read, and they are so beautiful. And so they need to be, if need be, spoon-fed to fellow Catholics, basically. And particularly now, now we're just in so much turmoil. So it's just more important now, just what does it mean to be a Catholic? And, obviously our leaders have failed us, but it doesn't mean we need to fail ourselves or our families or our church. The church needs us more than ever. The church needs educated Catholics. And honestly, once you read the documents, and if you're reading it in a group with people, great conversation comes from it. Absolutely great, because I also include what was happening in the culture at that time.
Yeah.
So that's where the discussion goes. It's like, wow, I didn't know anything about Marxism. I didn't know what happened.
Right.
I didn't know that all the Protestant churches and Catholic churches used to all be against contraception. I didn't know that, And so it's just the different things that people don't know, but are interesting. And also, and I'll just stop right now, but also it shows how the church interacts with the world. And I think that's the most important thing.
All right, there's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot of things I want to talk about. We're talking with Terry Polakovic. The book is Life and Love, Opening Your Heart to God's Design. It's breaking down these 8 different encyclicals going back to 1880 and then all the way up to Pope Francis. 2016 is when Amoris Laetitia came out. And you break down these 8 different encyclicals. And you mentioned in there doing this as a study group. Can you explain maybe who would be a good group to do this? I don't know, like singles, couples, men, women, high school. Like, where would you find a good group to meet up with? And then what might a study group on your book look like?
Actually, all of the audiences that you just proposed, it would work fine. And I think the book is easily accessible to a high school student, quite frankly. And I've thought about trying to introduce it to different theology teachers, that type of thing, because it would give their students, again, a history of what they're teaching. It wouldn't be just like out of the blue. But I did take a group through this. It was a group of women that we've been meeting for several years and studying different things and talking, and so we're close with each other. And when I was writing the book, I asked, they were my guinea pigs, if you will. But we have such great discussions. Again, it really starts with the culture, what's happening in the culture, but it shows that the church is just completely on top of the culture. In Pope Francis's Amoris Laetitia, I know it has been criticized quite a bit. I talk about in the book that Pope Leo XIII has this vision, and it's a vision of Jesus interacting with Satan, and Satan saying, I want to have control of your church for 100 years. Anyway, it goes into that Jesus says you can have control for 100 years. And we have been living those 100 years. So it just slowly has progressed to what Francis is dealing with today. He's just dealing with, sin everywhere. The culture, a broken culture.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the issues that we're dealing with today that are addressed in these different documents. You mentioned divorce and contraception. What are some of the other issues that we're facing in the church today that these documents can shed some light on?
Well, family life, mainly family life. Mm-hmm. It speaks to what do you do if you can't get along, that type of thing. What does the church, like a married couple, let's say, seeking a divorce, what does the church say about that? And where do you turn in times like that? It also talks about, in some way, it's not a focus of the book, but it does talk about homosexuality. What does the church teach about that? It talks about, we have so many fallen away Catholics today. It comes out in Pope Francis's document, how to walk with those people. We say this is the new evangelization, and that means we reach out to people, Catholics, who have left the church. That's our first audience. And so, he's very specific about accompanying people and the steps you take them through.
Another thing I want to point out to people is you have reflection questions at the end of each chapter.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how those came together and maybe how you see people using these questions?
Okay, yes. Well, the reflection questions are meant to stimulate the conversation. I envision...
In a group setting.
In a group setting,
Mm-hmm.
I envision, like, let's just say, you read a chapter a week, and then there's a leader of a group, and you meet together, and then the leader introduces that particular session that week with those questions. It was just a jumping off point. It
Sure.
doesn't mean that the conversation just has to go in that area, but I wanted to give people something to chew on and something to think about during the week, or when I'm picturing in my mind my group. We met every week. So, and actually what we did is we read the book aloud, so you weren't required to read it at home.
Okay.
The chapters are fairly short, so we read it aloud and then did the discussion questions.
How long would that end up taking?
It would take about an hour and a half.
Okay. Yeah, very doable. And then you got 8 chapters, you got 8 weeks, you're done in 2 months, so you have a nice little session there, a nice little group. Great idea.
People are always looking, it's been my experience, looking for material.
Yeah.
And they'll start different book clubs and that type of thing, but more often than not, they fall apart because they're just looking to be led. They don't want to have to do all the research to, do a good book or whatever. And so anyways, it's just another book along those lines that people can share, the conversation.
And the nice thing is you find a chapter that you really like or you want to learn more about, there's an encyclical about that. You can go check that out.
Exactly. And actually, I ran into someone the other day who bought my book, and she really liked it. Actually, the book has gotten very good reviews. So she told me, she really liked it. She said, I'm just going to go back and review some things. I just want to go back and meditate on them and review some things. Mm-hmm. So I hope that's how people use it. I hope it encourages an interest in those teaching documents.
All right. Well, where can people get a copy of the book?
Well, it was published by Our Sunday Visitor, so they can go to the Our Sunday Visitor, OSV.com website and order the book, or else they can get the book on Amazon.
All right. Again, it's called Life and Love, Opening Your Heart to God's Design. Terry Polakovic is the author, and appreciate you joining us today and sharing this with us. I love it.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it.